I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're about to hear a chapter of my ongoing fantasy narrative. Like the Skalds of old, I've written it to be heard, not read, and there's no music, sound effects, or character actors. It's all me. I do it in one single, flawless take. Skald picks up where we left off last time, so if you're confused, you might want to go back and check out some earlier episodes. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, Part 14. Maul awoke eye to eye with the panicked Feran raider. Though he was still groggy from sleep, and the clouds in the sky obscured what little moonlight there was in that thick forest, Maul could see clearly enough. Clearly enough to see that the long, twisting alabaster horn had been removed from underneath his jerkin. The leather strap that tied it to his neck had been cut. But the Feran, holding his breath to keep from disturbing Maul, his hand had slipped ever so slightly, and the gleaming blade he held had brushed ever so lightly against Maul's neck. Not hard enough to draw blood, but more than hard enough to rouse the sleeping savage from his restless slumber. Feran exhaled sharply and started to move back quickly, eager to increase the distance between himself and Maul. He'd been chosen for his stealth, his ability to get close, to steal the horn that the Confederation desired so greatly, to steal it before the unpredictable savage had a chance to destroy it, then retreat, allowing archers posted in the woods to fill Maul's sleeping body with arrows. But the Feran's stealth had failed him. He now found himself face to face with a violent brute, becoming more lucid and more furious by the second. The Feran had not been chosen for his strength, so retreat, even in abject failure, was the best path still open to him. But that path rapidly closed as Maul, fully awake now and full of murderous rage, rolled his heavily muscled frame on top of the Feran, pinning him to the ground. In the struggle, the alabaster horn fell to the dirt, but Maul, he would retrieve that later. He would dig through the bodies, kicking their limp forms aside. He would scoop the horn up, wipe the bloody gore from that glowing, pale perfection, then tie it back around his neck and continue on his way. First, the cowardly thief stared up at him. There was no time to reach down and retrieve his cudgel. Maul hadn't even taken a moment to cast his bleary, sleep-filled eyes around this new, unknown battlefield. The Feran had to be dealt with quickly and with finality. But Maul's hands were no good either, as one was in the process of holding back the Feran's treacherous blade, and the other was holding Maul up off the ground. With no other option, Maul used the hardest weapon still in his arsenal: his head. The first headbutt hit the Feran's nose directly, shattering it with a sickening crunch. But as blood ran down the Feran's gasping face, dazed from the pain, eyes struggling to focus, Maul reared back for another strike. The delicate, slightly turned up Feran nose was already ruined, hunched and crooked, collapsed on one side, but as Maul struck it again, his bloodied forehead crashing into the center of the Feran's face, it collapsed the nose entirely. As Maul relieved the dazed Feran of his blade, he heard the Feran captain cry out, "Loose your arrows!" Maul clutched the limp Feran body to him and rolled suddenly. A fraction of a second later and Maul would have been lost, filled with enchanted arrows, perhaps kept alive to barter with the tyrant queen, but more likely just abandoned, his rotting corpse left to feed the forest these silly little elves loved above all else. But as it was, Maul rolled just in time, as the arrows meant for him embedded themselves in the shocked, dying body of the Feran thief. The savage leapt to his feet immediately, clutching the Feran blade overhand, crouched low, ready to spring in any direction. His time was limited to the instant it took the Feran raiders to knock another volley of arrows, so he had to act quickly. First, his companion, SKALD. Maul pivoted slightly to get a better view and immediately saw the monk, Xylan, surrounded by 3 Feran raiders, 2 warriors and a shaman, swords drawn and placed to the monk's neck. It had been Xylan's watch. He had one single job: to keep his eyes open, to keep his ears unclogged, and wake Maul and SKALD at any indication of trouble. Instead, the fool had allowed them to be surrounded, ambushed, placed at a severe disadvantage. This was all his doing, so Xylan's fate would be in his own hands. He could see if those magics could save his skin, and if not, the godless monk could find out firsthand whether the gods were real. Maul continued his quick survey, glancing over the 3 elves in the process of pulling back their ornately detailed longbows, more concerned with looking like warriors than behaving like them. That was an excellent sign. Maul didn't spare a second more for them, though, as the next thing he saw was SKALD. She lay upon the ground, flanked by 2 Feran shamans. They each held a rare pink orchid to the giant cat's sleeping face, waving their hands in gentle motions, coaxing out thick yellow clouds of shimmering pollen that swirled around SKALD's head, keeping her deep within her dreams, saving the cat for some unknown but no doubt nefarious purpose. Maul had to make a quick decision: rescue Xylan, free SKALD, or deal with the archers who were mere moments away from sending 3 more arrows screaming through the air toward him. There was only one choice that Maul could make, the choice that would free the only companion who had never proved faithless, who had always been true. As the archers took aim, Maul rushed the shamans. They were shocked that one such as Maul would place himself in danger to free this wild beast, and they stared at him with wide eyes full of fear as he approached, short Feran blade in one hand and the other heaving the dead body of the Feran thief who had given them away. The thief's body crashed into the first shaman, knocking him clear of SKALD, allowing the orchid to fall to the ground and cease spewing out its intoxicating pollen. Meanwhile, the archers, expecting Maul to rush the most immediate threat, expecting to have a clear shot of the savage, their arrows all went slightly wide, burying their glowing metal heads in the dirt. Maul saw SKALD begin to stir slightly. She was, like him, a hardy beast. It was no doubt why they needed 2 orchids to subdue her. The other shaman threw up her hands, pleading with her attacker. "Mercy! Mercy, please!" But the only response Maul gave was that gleaming Feran blade, which he buried in the holy woman's pulsing jugular. Maul had closed the gap. He had come too close to the archers, which meant that they would either need to retreat and take better ground to make use of their bows, or abandon that tactic altogether. Though none of the 3 relished the idea of engaging in hand-to-hand combat with that raving savage, the one they saw tearing a blade out of their shaman's neck, it would be unthinkable to abandon the fight, unthinkable to leave behind that long, twisting alabaster horn that lay in the dirt before them, unattended. As the 3 archers surrounded Maul, unsheathing their long, razor-sharp rapiers, he spotted the remaining shaman. He had extricated himself from the arrow-filled dead body of his comrade and had begun scrambling wildly upon all fours, hugging the ground like the craven, gutless insect that he was, making his way steadily toward the object of their raid, that which he and his kind wanted, craved, needed more than anything else. His hands were nearly upon it, were nearly upon the horn, which reflected brightly in his covetous eyes when the thin Feran blade sailed through the air, whistling as it went, before burying itself in the base of his neck, severing his spinal column and putting a stop to his desperate crawl. I told you. I warned you. I promised you. You shall not have the horn unless it's with your dying breath as it plunges into your heart by my steady hand. Maul, his shoulders hunched, his brows lowered, stalked across the forest floor, placing himself between the horn and the 3 Feran archers, the 3 proud warriors who found their resolve crumbling in the presence of this merciless savage. The 2 kept their eyes on the one, their commander, waiting for her word, the signal that would send the 3 leaping forward in the 3-man Feran attack formation that had been drilled into them since they could walk. There wasn't time for any of that, as Maul was too impatient to just wait for an attack, and he came barreling toward them, unhooking his cudgel and raising it in a single, deadly motion. The rapier struck Maul, but to no real effect. These were weapons of finesse. They could do obscene amounts of damage, could reduce a rampaging bull to a bloody, heaving mess, but they required their wielder to place their points with calculated precision, not smash their narrow edges into the side of a roaring juggernaut. Maul's club was not a weapon of finesse. Nothing about Maul carried even the hint of finesse, calculation, or precision. He swung wildly, with reckless abandon, howling words that meant nothing to him, but that came naturally nonetheless, an ancient language written upon the blood that coursed through his veins. With careful planning, with feints and parries, with lunges and false retreats, Maul could have felled each of the Feran with single, devastating blows to the head, a heavy branch wielded with such force as to rattle the brain inside the skull, damaging it irrevocably. Maul could have dropped them all with single, well-planned, exquisitely placed blows. But he didn't. Instead, he was a whirlwind of crushing, uneducated, unplanned, brutal violence. A tornado rising up suddenly, without warning, lashing out in ways as unpredictable as they are devastating. Maul clubbed, he punched, he kicked, he bit, and he spat, using everything at his disposal to put the 3 archers down and grind them into the very dirt that they stood upon. The Feran had no time for commands, for formations, for defensive maneuvers. They had no time for anything but to hold up their hands, vain efforts to protect their genteel faces and their precious heads. But when they covered their faces, Maul kicked them in their sides. When they curled to protect their kidneys, he rained blows down upon the backs of their heads. When they attempted to grasp his swinging arms, the savage bit them, his teeth tearing through their soft, satin garments. And when they pleaded for mercy, begged to have their lives spared, he laughed at their lack of resolve and spat upon their cowardice. As Maul battered his attackers, gleefully cackling at every new wound, every crack of bone, every cry of agony, the Feran gazed up, spellbound by what they saw. Whether it was some trick of the clouds in that night sky, some grim coincidence, or something far, far more troubling, they watched in rapt terror as the savage took on another aspect. Shadows swirled about him, cloaking him in darkness as his blows cascaded down, a shaking, roiling abomination of sheer hate and rage. Wholly black, a void standing above them in the forest, the sole source of light emanating from the center of that scowling visage, an impossibly wide, shining, hateful smile. The repeated, unceasing blows had done their job, and 2 of the 3 Feran laid motionless, caught between life and death, drooling and courting that inky black void of nothingness. The commander, however, she wasn't gone just yet. Her senses had yet to leave her completely, and before they did, she saw something. She saw something that readied her to cast herself willingly into the abyss. She looked up, and she knew terror. She knew horror, she knew regret and unending agony, as the monster that stood above her let a maddening laugh ring out from that gleaming smile, and in the moment before the cudgel crashed down into the pharaoh's already cracked skull, in the exact moment before what remained of her senses was forced out through her ears, flowing down her long, delicate neck as a warm ooze, in that precise moment, she saw it. 2 long, gnarled antlers that sprouted up out of the top of the monster's head. Maul spun around, clutching his cudgel in his right hand, and with his left he smeared blood upon his face, the makeshift war paint that his tribe had worn since time immemorial. With his flaming, lunatic eyes staring out of that thick, bright red gore, Maul prepared himself to charge the remaining Feran, but stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her. There's been enough bloodshed, Maul. Please, stop this. Please, for your sister. Rithana stood in the forest, her eyes sad, near filled with tears at the sight of the dying Feran, many of whom she had known from her earliest memories. Weaponless, she held out both hands, palms facing up, pleading with her brother. Please, this can't end well for anyone. The Feran, me, not even you, Maul. They stole you, just like they did to me. No, Maul, not like you. You have suffered more than any man should, but your life has not been mine. Please, make peace with the Feran. They are not the High Elves, and they have never wronged you. Even in this very raid, they tried to save your life, that of SKALD and that of your friend, instead of slaughtering the 3 of you in your sleep. Give them what you promised. Give them what is rightfully theirs. Give them the horn. Maul stood, transfixed, torn by his instinctual love for his sister and the rage he felt for all those who would deny him and his family of what was rightfully theirs. He saw the blood on his hands. He saw the blood dripping off his face down to the ground below. He saw the horn and its terrible possibilities, and he saw his sister begging him for understanding. But all Xylan saw was a Feran shaman, using some forest magics to power and guide some mindless automaton, a mockery of humanity made of sticks and leaves and dirt. Xylan's training had left him inured to such mean conjurations, but Maul, especially in this single-minded state where his lizard brain had seized near total control, was completely taken in by it, and he stood staring slack-jawed at the mumbling stack of debris as one of the Feran warriors attempted to sneak by the savage and make his way to that long, twisting alabaster horn, the one that Xylan had eyed repeatedly since first coming across Maul and SKALD in the frozen northern forest. The other Feran raider still held his rapier to Xylan's neck, but his attention was divided just enough to give the godless monk the opening he needed. For a brief second, all he could spare, Xylan focused his energies, the brand on his neck glowing angrily, then shot his hand upwards, driving his fingers into the center of the raider's forehead. Bright lights exploded inside his mind, and the Feran instinctively pressed his palms to his eyes, dropping his rapier in the process. Xylan was ready for it, and in a single, beautiful, fluid motion, his robes billowing around him, he caught the thin sword, exchanged hands, then rose and spun, burying it in the stomach of the shaman. Though not a lethal strike, the blow to the shaman's gut served its purpose, distracting him from his conjuration, and Maul watched in awe as his sister crumpled, becoming little more than a pile of dirt before she'd even hit the ground. Maul couldn't piece together what had happened, but thinking would come later. Right now, his only concern was the foolish Feran trying in vain to make his way to that long, twisting alabaster horn. Maul shook the cobwebs from his brain, then lunged artlessly at the Feran. Killing him wasn't his concern, not immediately at least. His prime concern was keeping anyone and everyone away from what was his, what he had earned, not earned like the throne, which was his by divine and hereditary right, but earned by Maul's hard work, suffering, and sacrifice. No, no one else shall have that long, twisting alabaster horn. No one else shall lay hands upon it while Maul still drew breath. Unlike Maul, the Pharaoh was still fresh, as he had yet to enter the fray, and he was able to skip back nimbly, dodging Maul's frantic attack. But as soon as Maul hit the dirt, he was clambering back up to his feet, laughing. Now you run, now you understand what you have summoned up, the fury that you have called down upon your foolish heads. The Pharaoh's mind buzzed. This was no average Pharaoh. This was an elite raider capable of making flawless tactical decisions in a split second. But looking around, he saw what Feran tactics had gotten them thus far. A motionless thief, 2 dead shamans, 3 archers battered into unconsciousness or worse, a blinded swordsman, and a shaman who was rapidly bleeding out. It took less than a split second for him to do the math, so the Pharaoh screamed, "Retreat! Back to the tree!" Then turned, dropped his weapons like the coward that he was, and ran. Maul darted after the Pharaoh, but there was no hope of catching the lithe, nimble figure that seemed to almost float above the earth. Maul forged ahead nonetheless, with Xylan diving out of the way to escape the savage's path. The still healthy Feran swordsman made it to the tree just as the wounded shaman eased open its mouth, weaving his magics as quickly as possible. Together, they helped the blinded, insensate swordsman through first, then followed quickly behind. Cowards! Gutless, craven cowards! But when Maul reached the tree, still howling, he realized that he screamed his obscenities into the trunk of an old, gnarled oak. Nothing more. Maul, breathing heavily, turned, fully intending to rush to his companion, SKALD, to make sure that she was all right after falling under the shaman's spell, that the cat beast didn't suffer any lingering side effects. But when he turned, he saw something far more troubling. The godless monk, Xylan, crouched on the ground, gazing down at his hands in awe, and in them he held that long, twisting alabaster horn. He held Maul's prize. He placed his hands upon and sullied that which Maul had ventured forth to retrieve, doing what no others could, and more importantly, doing what no others would dare. To get the horn, he had killed the monster, and he had killed a part of himself. He killed off a bit of innocence, a bit of hope, a bit of warmth in an otherwise miserable world. He sacrificed some of his happiness, his joy, something that he had far, far too little of. Xylan held up his hand and he spoke calmly as the true king of men flew toward him, a smoldering, unstoppable ball of retribution rushing down upon him. Maul, wait. But Maul didn't wait. He couldn't wait. He could not wait to force that arrogant, skinny, deceitful monk to the ground, then stomp his delicate fingers, causing them to release the horn. That which was his, was Maul's, was his by the laws of men, gods, whatever came before, and whatever will come after. Maul raised the cudgel high above his head, and in doing so, gave in. Not to rage, no, that was too good, too easy. He gave in to him. He allowed the evil and hate to sprout up out of him like those gnarled antlers. He let the smile in, let it consume every thought in his head, and he smiled in return as it spoke to him. Yes, Maul. Yes. Maul held the cudgel above his head, tensing his entire body for that one triumphant, glorious, breathtaking, cathartic downward stroke. The one that would crack and shatter what remained of the sundered worlds, that would call up the flaming ichor that courses through the ground, would guide those undying flames as they washed over the earth, leaving nothing but cinders and screams in their wake. Maul screamed in a language he had never heard, and in that moment, as Xylan gazed into Maul's searing eyes, he saw all of creation and its inevitable fiery destruction. He saw it, and he knew, he understood, and in that moment, the godless monk was godless no longer. If you're enjoying SKALD, please leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or preferably both. It's a great, completely free way to help out the only story that matters. Plus, if you leave a good one, I'll read it on the show. Bourbon Master 2 says, great story. Clearly, Aubrey is an exceptional talent. Not only does he have the ability to create an awesome story, but also the ability to tell a story that creates excitement and leaves you wanting more. Want to make sure that SKALD is here waiting for you every Thursday morning? Head over to patreon.com/SKALD, where you can pledge as little as $1 a month to help cover the costs of doing the show. $1 a month is nothing. It works out to $0.25 per show. But if everyone listening contributed that much, I wouldn't lose money on hosting fees and could even begin to make a little bit of money back for my hard work. Imagine that. To sign up, get great rewards, or just to toss SKALD $0.25 per episode, head to patreon.com/SKALD. Signing up is safe, secure, and easy. Know what else is easy? Finding me online. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, they're all Aubrey Sitterson. AubreySitterson. No spaces, no numbers. Or head over to my website, AubreySitterson.com, for links to everything, including social media, my non-SKALD related projects, comics, podcasts, t-shirts, credits, bio, and contact information. Finally, if you're really digging SKALD, please help get the word out any way you can. My birthday's coming up next month, so here's some ideas. SKALD billboards, SKALD skywriters, and, most importantly, SKALD crop circles. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.